We're live? Okay, welcome. Welcome, everybody, and thank you for joining us here on our Monday, January 23rd board meeting. Can you all hear us? Can you hear me okay? Yeah, okay. I'll try to do my best, and I'll encourage board members as well to make sure their microphone's close and so everybody can hear. So thank you for joining us here tonight. If you have an agenda in front of you, you will see that item number 1 deals with our 5 strategies: student-centered learning, equity, mental health and safety, school climate, family and community engagement. Item number 2 on the agenda is where our meeting can be found on YouTube. Item number 3 is a call to order. So, Ms. Steves, will you please determine if we have a quorum present?
Yes, Mr. Chair, we do.
Okay, thank you. I'd ask everybody to stand for the pledge and remove your hats if you can, if you would.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Bellingham, thank you for leading us in the pledge.
You're welcome.
All right, this brings us to item number 4, the approval of the agenda. I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Second?
We have a motion by Mr. Robichaud, a second by Ms. Steves. Any further discussion? All right, hearing none. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 7-0. Thank you. This brings us to item number 5, recognition, awards, and presentations. Number 5A is our student board representative report. Ms. Huberty.
So on Friday the 13th, we met with our district youth council, and we meet every month. And this meeting, we split up into 3 different committees, and each committee, students pick themselves. So the 3 committees where we had the equity board, which will then meet with the equity board we already have, which is all adults. And so this equity board will collab with them and help them work on how we can improve our school system. Our second committee was the mental health committee, and they'll be working with Janet to work on our end goal for this mental health committee and what we can do and how we're going to improve our school. And our third and final committee was the data/planning committee. And so twice a year, we have what we call the Data Summit, which is with Faribault, Northfield, TCU, and WEM. And so we just went to ours a month ago in Northfield. And so this year, this spring, it's at Faribault. So this committee is going to help plan it at Faribault. And so they talked about what data do we want to look at, what conversations do we want to have, how do we want to collab with our other schools. And each committee self-appointed a chair. And so that was really cool to see students take on that lead themselves and personally pick that they want to be head of this committee. We also will be having check-ins and check-outs. So there's one final goal of each committee, but then there's also little goals in between. So we'll be checking in with our directors, Martha London and Tracy Cochran, to work on our check-in goals and our check-out goals, so that each month we have little progress along to make our big goal. And so that was really cool to see each group came up with a goal to improve our school.
Wonderful, thank you. Do you have anything else you'd like to share? No. Board members, any questions or comments for Ms. Huberty?
Appreciate her sweatshirt.
You what?
Appreciate the sweatshirt.
You like her sweatshirt? Gotcha. Thank you, we appreciate the update. Okay, this brings us to item 5B, FAPSETA, Faribault School Board Leadership Scholarship. Come on up and feel free to grab a few more chairs.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, board members, thank you for giving us this opportunity this evening. I'm Richard Berge, who serves on the FAPSETA board, the Faribault Area Public Schools Educational Trust Association. So we're here tonight to kind of give you an annual report briefly on our progress, and a little bit about the organization, since we do have some new board members. In 1986, with the encouragement and backing of leaders from First United Bank, then Faribault Federal, the State Bank of Faribault, and Norwest, now Wells Fargo, we organized the Faribault Area Public Schools Educational Trust Association, or at that time, and it still is known as the Falcon Fund. When we set up the bylaws, we did set it up broadly so that we could do more than just offer scholarships. And although we didn't activate that another portion of the Trust Association at that time and focused primarily on scholarships, we had a fund drive initially trying to raise $50,000, which was successful. Up to that point, and I was superintendent at that point, we had a few locally sponsored scholarships. I think the largest one was about $500. Today we have, we're proud to say, with the strong support, State Bank of Faribault, Faribault Transportation Company, First United Bank, and many others, we have one scholarship that we offer annually for $10,000, and I think around 20 in the $2,000 area. And plus other scholarships that are what we call flow-through. People donate the money, it goes through our organization for the selection process. FAPSETA is governed by a 12-member board. We meet about 4 or 5 times a year. We do have committees on finance, scholarship, marketing, and so forth that also meet. Now, the Falcon Fund has grown substantially with the support of local businesses, staff, family, friends, former graduates, and those of you from the Board of Education who started a scholarship last year and contributed to that. So thank you very much. That's much appreciated. Education is the most valuable resource that we have because it enables individuals to achieve their highest potential. And when we are able to do that, of course, we more or less raise all boats. Everybody benefits for a more highly educated public. Our goal is to continue to expand educational improvement opportunities for all students in the Faribault Public Schools. Now I'm going to turn it over to Garrett Reagan, who will talk a little bit about and explain our scholarship selection process. The one other part of our organization is called the FEAP, or the Faribault Educational Opportunity Enrichment Program, whereby we fund teachers can apply for special projects to be financed for their classroom. And there's a committee for that. They take all of those applications and then make grants from the amount that is allocated. So I'm turning it over to Garrett.
Thank you, Dr. Berge, well said, and thank you to Mr. Chair and the members of the board. My name is Garrett Regan from Faribault Transportation. I've had the privilege of being on the Falcon Fund board for the last 11 years, and particularly I've served on the scholarship committee where we have the opportunity to evaluate the applications. Many different sections are filled out on the application, such as essays where students talk about their goals, past experiences, GPAs are mentioned on there, and other tests that they may be taking, activities and whatnot. And it's been a very rewarding process. It's very cool to see what I'm always continuously impressed about is how much the students really do take on a daily basis. So they're all working multiple jobs, and many committees that they're a part of, in addition to playing sports and of course going to school. So it's been really fun to see that. It's fun to kind of learn a little bit about the youth of our community and going through that process. And it really shows that the individuals receiving these scholarships have earned it. And it's fun to see kind of what Faribault, our community, is producing and sending students out, soon to be adults into the world. So the essays and the applications, just how they're organized, put together, how well written they are, is very impressive every single year, and it's fun to see. It seems as though the scoring gets tighter and tighter every year as we go through it, and there's a committee of about 4 or 5 of us that rank and score, tally up each of the sections, and then at the end of that, every application is totaled up, and we kind of total up the numbers there and figure out and start placing scholarships with individuals. So, like I said, difficult to turn those individuals away that don't succeed in getting scholarships, which is why we're always open to accepting more to give out, because there's a lot of deserving individuals in this community. So, thank you for your consideration tonight and your time.
Brett Pruitka will now talk about the amount that we've been able to collect and also to distribute over the years.
Sure. Thank you guys for your time. It's good to be here. And thanks for your service to the community, all of you. First of all, we did hand out a little, our marketing brochure, so you have all that in front of you. Hopefully get that posted to the website. It's a good piece with a lot of information on it. Second, I'd like to say we have the best FAPSITA president we've ever had sitting in this room tonight. So thank Jerry for his, actually, we probably all served in different roles. So
Be careful you sit.
Yeah, I know that. We gave the history and the process. So since our inception, our board has awarded 1,544 total scholarships, just under $1.8 million since 1986. It's a big dollar amount. This year, we're going to continue expanding our opportunities. We'll probably award roughly $110,000 again to our students. Again, $10,000 being our largest scholarships, and they kind of break from there. And that breaks out to probably 65 to 70 different scholarships. So there's a wide range of opportunities there. And for those seniors listening, scholarships will be out, or the applications will be out mid-February. There's a turn-in date. And it's a drop-dead turn-in date, no seconds, no retakes. Turn it in. You've got like a month and a half to do it, and we'll get them scored and processed, and excited for our banquet in May. You got any questions?
All right, thank you. We appreciate the presentation. Board members, questions, thoughts, comments?
I just want to say I think last year was the first year the board offered a scholarship through that, and I don't know very many school boards that actually offer a scholarship, so thanks for your commitment last year. We're kind of here seeing if we can continue a tradition as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a comment. I think
Would you mind just moving the mic a little closer? Thank you. Thank you. A little closer so it's louder.
I think I should be sitting next to these 3 gentlemen. I think it's important to note that these individuals offer their time, and also the other board members on FAPSETA offer their time and energies and their talents at gratis. They do it willingly to support the students from our high school, and they get no reward other than watching the students receive the scholarships during the award ceremony. So they do this without any compensation, so appreciate that. And I will reserve one more comment after the rest of the board speaks.
Thank you. Other comments? Any board member? Once again, just thank you. To the people in the audience and the people watching online, if you have not had a chance to be at the awards banquet, if you will, presentation in the spring, I would highly encourage you to attend. When people don't think that our students in Faribault are doing great things, it's unbelievably rewarding and simply awesome to see the amount of kids get these scholarships and what they plan on doing in the upcoming years. It's fabulous. It takes about 3 hours or so. Hopefully there's not a tornado and we have to clear out, right? But just a huge thank you, as Mr. Robichaud said, to all of you, the entire board, to the donors, right? It's not possible without the donors and whatnot. And so just a huge thank you, and I know our students greatly appreciate it. But I can tell you there's great students coming out of this school district, so. Mr. Robichaud.
Mr. Chair, just one more comment, and as Brett indicated, last year the board established a leadership scholarship through donations from the board, and one of the requests that's coming as a fellow board member is that if anybody wishes to donate 1 month of their salary toward the scholarship, that would be muchly appreciated. And I believe that we have payroll deductions that can be established for that. Now, if you wish to do it individually, that certainly is your option, but to continue with that scholarship speaks well for the Board of Education, but more importantly, for our commitment to the students of Faribault Senior High School.
Thank you, Mr. Robichaud. If you have any questions on that, Mr. Robichaud will be happy to help get connected, and Ms. Averill will as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you again.
Thank you.
Okay, this brings us to item number 6, school board public comment guidelines. I'll read these and then we'll open it up for comment. This is an opportunity for residents, businesses, property owners, parents, students, and employees of the Faribault Public School District to address the board. You must sign up in person at the board meeting and address the board from the podium. Members of the public will address their remarks with civility and respect. After being recognized by the chair, each individual will identify themselves and the group they represent, if any. Please state your reason for addressing the board. This is not a time to debate an issue, but for the board to hear your comments. Public comment is not available at work sessions, closed sessions, or special board meetings of the school board. The Minnesota Government Data Practices Act prohibits comment about a specific student or staff members, even without naming them in open session. This includes the public comment portion of our meeting. The board respects and values input, but when it relates to a specific student, staff, or to a specific matter, such input must be heard by the appropriate personnel, such as the building principal or superintendent, and not during an open meeting of the school board. Anyone interested in making a public comment will be asked to complete an information card before the meeting starts, providing their name, address, and topic of their comment. All comments must conform to School Board Policy 206, which is available for review on the district website at www.faribault.k12.mn.us. Each speaker will have 3 minutes to make comments on one specific topic. Each topic will have a total of 15 minutes allowed for comments. With that, I will start with our first comment. The topic is welcome new board members, and it's Mr. Michael Malika. Did I say that correctly? Okay, wonderful. Come on up, please.
Thank you for the opportunity to address the board and the public in general. I just wanted to welcome the new school board members. We're adding some diversity and inclusion into the opinions and experiences that I think are going to serve the board well for the issues that are coming up and in the future, because I looked at some of the material that's presented and there's some challenges. I mean, there's financial challenges, there's student participation, student counts, all of that stuff is going to require a very diverse opinion, and it's going to take a lot of unique solutions to get through this. So again, just my opportunity to welcome the new members, and I'm looking forward to the differences in opinion. Thank you.
Welcome. Thank you. Next topic is queer literature. Mickey O'Flynn, did I pronounce that correctly? Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Mickey O'Flynn, and I've lived in the district for several years. I'm here to talk about the importance of mental health among our students and how curriculum and materials relate to that. Students who identify as lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, non-binary, queer, are at much increased risk for mental health issues such as depression, and they are known to be at increased risk for suicide. Because of this, I feel passionately that it is important that we do everything we can in our curriculum, in our materials, in the way we treat one another, our attitudes, and our behaviors, to accept all students as they come to us. Students who don't identify as lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, non-binary can benefit greatly from education that helps them to accept everyone, to acknowledge differences, and to be tolerant. I hope those of you, especially on the Mental Health Committee, keep this in mind in your work as you commit to helping all students feel accepted and valued, and reduce the risk of mental health challenges such as depression and suicidal ideation. Thank you.
Thank you. Our last one for the evening topic is queer literature. And Faith Jameson.
My name is Faith Jameson, pronouns she, her. I'm queer, and this is about gender ideology. But most importantly, this is about the queer youth in Faribault. To the esteemed members of the Faribault School Board, trans students exist, non-binary students exist, gay students exist, queer students exist. Even if you ban queer literature, queer students will still exist. Young people will learn about gender identity. Young people will learn about sex. They will learn about birth control and puberty, whether or not you give them a safe environment to learn it in. As school board members, queer youth see you. Students in your district see how you talk about them and how you discuss issues affecting them. I implore you, both with your words and your actions, to make school a safe place for all students to learn. And now, because Faribault students hear how they are discussed in these meetings, this is my message to them. Just because some people are uncomfortable with your identity doesn't mean that it's not your identity. Your identity is not a political debate. Your identity is valued. You are loved. There are places that not only acknowledge you, but appreciate you for exactly who you are. Thank you.
Thank you. I believe, Ms. Averill, that was the three we had? Okay, that concludes our community comment tonight. Thank you to all three of you. The next item on our agenda is item number 7, the consent agenda. I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Chair, I so move.
Second.
Mr. Chair. No, we're looking at the minutes, right?
Yes, yes, the consent agenda. Yep.
I think it was it January 3rd. I just had a correction, I believe, unless you've already done it for the District Advisory Board. I think that was Linda Bedreau. And I think the Lindas got mixed up there, so, correct?
Okay, District Advisory Committee, you're saying instead of you, it should be
Yes.
Linda Boudreau.
Yes,
Is that correct?
yes.
Okay, we
Okay.
will,
Just a correction to the minutes.
thank you, appreciate that.
Mhm.
All right, so we have a motion and a second with the correction being pointed out. Is there, and typically there's no discussion on the consent agenda, but I do want to open that up for a discussion. Is everybody good with that, correction, if you will? Okay. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 7-0. Thank you. This brings us to item 8, retirements. There are none tonight. This brings us to item 9, finance. Item 9A are the minutes. Mr. Gerdes, you want to come forward? I think you'll be presenting a fair amount here tonight. Item 9B is simply the Finance Committee meeting schedule. I think everybody's had a chance to look at that. That's just simply a report. There's no action that needs to be taken on that. So, Mr. Gerdes, if you would, I guess I'll have you probably start with item 9C, the budget, and 9C1, the enrollment report.
Okay, so I think we have that up on the screen, so
Yeah,
it's probably a little
Yeah, I was just going to say,
hard to.
is there any way we can make that any bigger, or no? Sorry. No. I'm seeing no. So I know board members, you have it in your packet. People online, you can see it. Anybody in the audience, it's all linked to our website, so it's all out there to see if you can't read what's on the screen. So go ahead, Mr. Gerdes.
So what you have in front of you is the December 2022 snapshot of our current ADM. So I actually received a very good question over the weekend around ADM and really what that means. And just so everybody is aware, I thought it was a good time to refresh everybody on that is ADM aren't necessarily belly buttons, as Mr. Benty calls them, right? They are a unit of how we get paid. So the state pays us based on actually a weighted ADM, but to get to the weighted ADM, you actually have an ADM. And so it's really a unit of payment based on the educational funding formula. So I just wanted to just remind the board of that. So as we look here, what you'll see in the columns that are now getting bigger for you is the revised numbers that will be presented here shortly in the revised budget. But what we have done is because we have actually more students, which is a good thing, right, this year than what we projected in the adopted budget back in June of 22. We also have additional students because of our contracted PSEO model. We have moved the revised budget number from 3145 to 3230, which you see there in the bottom right-hand corner. So of that increase in 85 kids, roughly 44 of them are because of PSEO, which happened after the board adopted the budget. And then the difference of 41 students are the additional students that we have put into the revised budget, which we will show you shortly. So, any questions on the revised ADM? Okay, we'll move on to the next ones, comparative financial reports. Not a whole lot to share here. I did mention this at finance. Excuse me, I'm moving this around. That we have seen some additional increases in our electric bill, so that you'll see last year, year to date, we were about 51%. This year, we're at about 68%. So there could be a future budget revision due to the cost of our electrical in our buildings. It is not that the amount of electricity has really changed. It is solely based on the price of the kilowatt hour that has changed. Okay. Down below, you'll see a snapshot of our self-insurance account. Again, we continue to make small gains on this every month. We're roughly $320-some thousand ahead year to date. So that is positive news. Just keep in mind that there is still a lot of the year left yet for that, right? With the biggest part of our potential claims coming towards the end, end of the year, because it's a longer period of time than the first part of the year. Yeah, Richard.
Yeah, so that money stays into the account. It's not put into the general budget, right?
That is correct. That is correct.
Also, I had a question, if okay, Mr. Chair, that with the student count, is it good to undercount or be right on or overcount with a couple new board members?
So if you can hold that question for a separate presentation, I'll talk about that
okay.
in a little farther down the road.
Thank you.
Yep, it's a good question. Any other questions on the comparative financial statements? Okay, we'll move into the next one, which is our investment report. The one thing that I wanted to just bring up here with the investment report, you can see that this report this month is a little longer than it has been in the past. Early in December, we moved away from our traditional short-term 30-day investment portfolio and locked into some longer-term CD stepped laddered CDs, whatever you want to call And so you can see that they're all listed here for your, the new ones that are listed here in December. So just note, we have some 6-month CDs in there, some 1 year, some 18-month, and also some 2 year, with the highest rate at just over 5% on the 18-month CDs. Any questions on that report? Okay, moving on to the next, the analytical. Again, just a snapshot in here. Chris? I was told I got to drive myself tonight, so we're going to start again with the first page of this. Again, a little bit harder to read, but again, what you can see here is the red dotted line was last year's trend line, and the line at the top, shown by all the shaded colors, is the current year. Now, for the new board members in the group, last year, the reason we had a lower red dotted line is because last year was our first year of using a large amount of ESSER funds. And we had about $7 to $9 million in ESSER funds last year. That took a long time into the school year to get off the ground, get approved by the Department of Ed, get the budgets approved by the Department of Ed, and then actually draw on those. And so it was really until February and March until we were able to fully get caught up with our ESSER funds. Now, the reason that number is so low is that during the school year, we don't record revenue until the revenue is received. So if you're not billing revenue, you're not receiving revenue. Thus, our fund balances look a little bit lower. But as you can see at the end of the year, we finished roughly where we typically finish the year. If you look at the blue line, you can see the blue line there is slightly lower than the red line. That's based on our revised budget, which puts us a little bit lower than actually where we finished fiscal year 22. So, any questions on this chart? Hopefully next year both those lines align a lot closer. Okay, moving through to the next chart here. Again, this is just a snapshot in revenue. I'm not going to stop a long time here, but if you look at the projected numbers to the actual numbers, most of those numbers are within 2 or 3 percentage points. Just like every other year, we track really, really close to our budget because not a lot of things change substantially here other than funding sources. So revenue is looking right on point. Again, if you look at the expenses, same thing with the expenses. There's no real anomalies there with the expense reports. The last page I just want to stop and talk about here just real quick, and I got to use my notes because I can't see that, is as we look at this summary of all the accounts, right, I want you to just make note that a lot of those counts have red numbers after the fact, right? Again, remember this report is a point in time. The point in time this year happens to be December 31st. So just keep that in mind. But you can see that we're doing well across the board with revenue and expenses. Again, I do want to point out that if you move over to the far right side of the page, that our irrevocable trust used for retirement and health insurance payments is still losing money based on the stock market. So keep that in mind as we move forward. We watch that pretty close, other than, there's not a lot we can do with it, but just make you aware if that's what is happening. Okay? The rest of the reports...
Mr. Olson?
Yeah, can you change that?
I'm sorry.
Can you change that so we're not losing money? Or what can you do?
Since we're invested in a very large pool of money with a lot of other accounts, there's not a lot we really can do but write it out. The thing to keep in mind, and this wasn't in fiscal year 22, but in fiscal year 21, we did have about a $535,000 gain on that account, right? When we rolled the market up, we made $535. Last year we lost roughly $330, I believe the number was, and now we've lost a little bit more here. So if you look at it long term, we're still money ahead, right? But if we bail out now, you're typically putting yourself in a bad spot to buy stocks lower and ride it back up the hill again. So, the rest of the slides in there are more for reference. They give detail by fund if you need something to look at, if you want more detail on all of those. So, any questions necessarily on the analytics tonight?
Board members, any questions, thoughts, comments?
Or any of the other reports for that matter?
All right, not hearing anything. Thank you, Mr. Gertis. Don't go far, stay there, I guess.
I'm not moving.
That brings us to item 9C5, gifts and donations, resolution 23-25. This is a resolution, so we'll do a roll call here when I'm done reading these. The following gifts and donations have come in of recent here. The first one is 4th Avenue United Methodist Church. Packets with coffee, cocoa, and sweet treats for Faribault Public School staff, 600 plus with a value of $1,200. Next one is Harry Brown's Family Automotive, Yeti mugs for Faribault Public School staff, 600 plus with a value of approximately $20,000. Faribault Booster Club has 3 donations. Jefferson Elementary TV and outlets. The TV outlets total $615. The TVs total $1,319.94. The next donation from the Faribault Booster Club is for the Faribault Middle School for new chairs, $13,037.20. And the last donation from the Faribault Booster Club is for Roosevelt Elementary painting and falconizing project for $2,400. The next donation on here is from First English Lutheran Church. Hats, gloves, mittens, and scarves with a value of approximately $200 for Lincoln Elementary School. The following donations are going to be for the Nest at Faribault High School. Carol Levi Clothing, Our Savior's Lutheran Church, $250. Dwayne and Joni Geiger, 11 new winter coats with a value of $165. Deb Sonic, I think I pronounced that right, 4 boxes of clothing and shoes. Mary Hackett, box of feminine products and soap. Annette Schwartz, 2 bags of clothing. Once again, all those were for the Nest at Faribault High School. The last donation on here is from Carl Voss, $500 for No Tummies Left Behind for food service negative meal accounts for Faribault Public School students. With that, I will entertain a motion to approve all of these gifts and donations as stated.
Mr. Chair, I'll move Resolution 2325 for approval.
We have a motion by Mr. Bellingham. Do we have a second?
Second.
That was Ms. Boudreau. Any further discussion on this item?
Mr. Chair, if I may, all donations are so much appreciated, but I just have to compliment and thank so much 2 or 3 really big boosters here. Harry Brown's, thank you so much, $20,000 here, and Faribault Booster Club, once again, coming through, another $16,000 for needs for our students, and Carl Voss, $500 for No Tummies Left Behind. Thank you so much, benefiting our students and staff here at Faribault Public Schools. Greatly, greatly appreciated.
Thank you, Mr. Bellingham. Any other thoughts or comments? I'll just follow it up on what Mr. Bellingham said. Every month we get to read these, and we're just very thankful for the support the community provides to our students and our staff and our school district as a whole. So thank you. All right, with that said, Ms. Steves, will you please do a roll call?
John Bellingham.
Aye.
Linda Boudreau.
Aye.
Linda Moore.
Aye.
Richard Olson.
Aye.
Jerry Robichaud.
Aye.
Cassie Steves. Aye. Chad Wolf.
Aye.
Passes 7-0.
Thank you for that. Brings us to item 9D, items reviewed by the Finance Committee and are suggested for board approval. So item 9D1, consider approval of the fiscal year 2022-2023 revised budget. Mr. Gertis, you have a helper here.
I do.
Will you just
I
please
need
make
a
sure,
lot of those
will you
helpers, right?
please make sure that he gets introduced?
Yeah, I will do that. So for those of you that don't know, this young man sitting next to me, his name is Chris Nelson. He is the controller here. And so he's going to do some presenting with me tonight on a variety of different topics that we are going to share with the board for the next 2, 3, 4 hours. So I'm just kind of waiting for the document. There. All right. So the first item tonight, as Chad alluded to, is our revised budget. So every year, the finance team, and again, I'll say the finance team, but it's a lot more than just Chris and I. While Chris and I get to sit here and present this to you, we have a great team that works behind the scenes and daily with all the daily operations and all the student counting and the MARS work that is done in order to put all this data together for you tonight. So we're going to start with the revised budget. Again, we're bringing this in January. Typically, this is done in February or March, but because of the state of the state, we're going to try and move things along a little faster this year, so we don't end up rushing the processes as we get closer to the end of the school year. So what I am going to start with is on this slide. So the items in green, very similar to what we have done in the past, is items that are part of what is called the ARP, or the American Rescue Plan. This is also known to the finance world as ESSER 3, right? So this is the third round of federal dollars. So we all know that in the adopted budget, we have roughly $6 million in the adopted budget today. These top four in the revenue are things that have been added to the budget since the adoption back in June. There's not a lot of substantial dollars in there, but we bring this forward to you guys so you know the extent of all the different all the different buckets that we are working with. So the 163 bucket of money is federal dollars for summer STEAM. So that is $236,000 that has already been successfully spent. The FIN 140 and 141 are both federal dollars, additional federal dollars for special ed. And Mr. Daynard and his team are spending those. Those will end in this year, in fiscal year 23. And then the state has also come out with an additional round of FIN 170 money, which is just south of $80,000. And that is for our nurse pairs and testing supplies and different things that we are still doing throughout this pandemic. You've heard Mr. Rutherford, the IT director, and myself talk about the ECF funding. That was a one-time shot in the arm due to some finagling around getting some funding for some iPads here in fiscal year 23. That was the $325,000. And then a safety grant that we were able to get, which adds $107,000 into the budget. As you heard me talk about earlier, we adjusted the ADM to 3230, again up 85 from adopted budget back in June. On the expenditure side, so Faribault Transportation, you heard Garrett talk a little earlier tonight, was able to save us one route through their efficiencies and things that they do in terms of routing. So that's a savings, i.e. the parentheses around that number, of just south of $63,000. You also heard me mention our contracted PSEO program. While we have added revenue of those 44 students, along with that, and that's an expense of about $305,000 for that program. The next line down is the salary and benefit additional number to all those contracts that settled earlier this fall. That amounts to about $141,000. And the bottom four that I just talked about are the expense side of the revenue that I talked about earlier, since again, federal dollars are net neutral to the district. I'll stop there. Any questions on any of the really major changes to the revised budget? Okay, we'll flip to the next page. Just a couple other things I'm just going to mention here real quickly. As we look at the revised budget, and you'll see this, Chris will talk about this a little bit on the summary sheet. This projects our undesignated fund balance to be just south of 6.5 million or 11.19%. Food service fund, there's been some changes to the food service fund. Roughly $800,000 in revenue and expenses due to the expansion of the CACFP program. Now, while that doesn't necessarily help our excess fund balance that we have today, it does certainly benefit a lot of the kids that we are now serving out in the community.
Mr. Gertis, what does CACFP stand for? Yeah.
Yeah, the supper program, as I call
Okay.
it, right?
Okay, thank you.
So it's Child and Consumer Food Program or something. Zach, help me out here. All right. Well, I had 2 or 3 right out of 5.
Thank you.
All right. So, anyway, and then moving down, there's just a lot of additional grants. Oops, excuse me. Okay, looks like we're not going backward. There we are. A lot of the different grants that the community ed department has done and completed since the adopted budget back in June. There's the 5 major ones listed right there on the screen. And note that these dollar amounts are the amounts of these grants that are reflected in the fiscal 23 budget. A lot of these grants are much larger and multi-year in nature. All right. Nothing really new with the building and construction fund. We have spent all the 2019A abatement bond funds on Jefferson Elementary. That project was just completed about 3-4 weeks ago with the parking lot. It looks very nice. And we're continuing to spend down the balance of the 2020A COP funds at Roosevelt Elementary with the letting of the chiller and HVAC project over there for this summer. Again, not a lot new with any of the smaller funds there below. The one thing, Richard, now I'm going to get back to the question you asked me about half an hour ago now about the ADM. So I left this slide the way it is because you can kind of see towards the end here, we have the 2022 adopted, the 2022 revised, the 2022 final, the 23 adopted, and the 23 revised, right? And it kind of looks like it's a roller coaster, right? Up and down, right? And so really what that does is, well, those numbers aren't terribly big, right? The adopted budget going from 3231 up to ending the year at 3271, right, which is 40 kids. You know, 40 kids at the proverbial $8,000 is $300,000, right? $320,000. So that's a handful of teachers, right, at the end of the day. And same with this year, right? Now, while there's the PSEO effect in 23, again, we're off by roughly 40 students, right, in our modeling. And so we'll talk about the modeling again in a little bit. But what we've tried to do in the enrollment is really try and hone in on the model to try and eliminate this wave, right? Now, while again, 40 kids isn't a lot out of 3,200, it's a little bit, right? So we're really trying to fine tune the modeling and trying to get that a little closer. So while we don't want to be short, Richard, to your point, I think there's probably a little room that we can maybe get that 40 down a little bit, right? So that we can move that number a little closer to dead even as we move forward. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in the enrollment projections, which is farther into the night. Okay, so I'm going to turn this over to Chris, let him talk for a while because I'm out of it.
We do. Okay. So this is the adopted budget that you guys approved right a few months ago. The biggest, a couple big items here. The first one is that the fund balance, we were looking at a decrease of $778,000. That has gotten better in the adopted, or in the revised, excuse me. And the other significant change is the food service balance has gone down just a little bit, trying to use up some of that very healthy balance. Then here's community service, construction, debt service, internal service, and OPEB. Nothing too exciting changed in those. So here is the revised. You can see where we were at 778,000 down at the end of the year for Fund 1. Now we're a decrease of 128,000. So significantly better than adopted. And then, like I said, the food service is down from just under 12,000 to just under 5,000 up. And then all the other funds. There's a lot more detail if you go out and look at the budget book PDF that's out on Board Book. Really just tried to put up the greatest hits, most interesting stuff for you, so you don't have to sit through a 2-hour presentation. And the big one on here is, as we've mentioned before, local property taxes are going up, and a lot of that is because offset at the state. And federal is down quite a bit, and that is just the drop-off of the COVID money. This is a summary of our expenses, 2 years of actuals and this year's revised. One thing I did want to point out here, as the auditors mentioned at the audit, our administration and district support there is down a little. Well, administration's down, but even as of the actual 22, state average is 9%. Faribault operates at 7%, so we are, in absolute terms, 2% less of the budget. Or another way of looking at it is that's 22% more efficient than state average, which is something to be proud of. And then this is a breakdown by object class, and we are a services organization. 77.6% of our budget in Fund 1 is up there in salaries and wages and employee benefits. This is the food service breakdown. Both revenue and expenses are up quite a bit. You can see it goes from 2.4 million to just over 3 million for revenue, and then expenses 2.4 to 3.3, and that is pretty much entirely the CACFP program, the additional revenue and offsetting expenses. And then community ed here, the deficit spend is at just over $2 million, $209,000, but still ends the year with a positive balance. Okay.
Thank you, Chris. So just to wrap up the revised budget presentation, what you have here is a 5-year historical on the ending fund balance for 2019, 2020, 21, 22. And then down below, you can actually see the percentages. So the one thing I wanted to point out, in 21, we had 12.91% fund balance. In 22, it dropped to 11.33. Now, while on the surface that looks like about a 0.85% drop in fund balance, if you look at the actual fund balance numbers themselves, they only dropped by about $195,000 roughly. The reason for that is that if you look at the second line, which is the denominator in the equation, it went from 53,000,005 to 58,000,003. So whenever you increase the denominator, you lower the overall percentage. So it is a function of total expenses, not necessarily a function of loss on operations. Does that make sense to everybody involved there? And as Chris mentioned, the 23 revised numbers are there. Again, a drop of about $120,000, but really only a drop of 0.14%. So not a huge drop. Okay? Again, as a function of a percentage. So you have to look at both those values in tandem to draw the conclusions, because one is not always consistent with the other.
Gentlemen, quick question for you. Regarding the food service fund, we have a pretty sizable, healthy balance in that account. There you go. Thank you for bringing that up. There's only certain things that can be used for, right? In excess in that fund can't be transferred out into the general fund.
That is correct. I have tried every which way from Sunday to spend this money, and I have lost almost every one of those challenges that I've tried to do. So until we have some very significant needs in our food service area in terms of equipment, I don't think a lot is going to change.
Is there a
in that
certain
area.
length of time that we can carry a balance that size, or no?
There is nothing in state statute that says we can do that. We'll probably be getting a letter sometime soon that says, hey, try and spend it down.
Okay.
But if they say no to everything, it is what it is.
And the big increase came from what?
The largest increase in this fund balance really came during COVID. And the efficiencies and all the work that the food service team did in order to not only feed the children during COVID when we were in distance learning, but to feed the community and the number of meals we served during that roughly 2-year period of time. So we more than tripled the amount of meals served, which more than tripled the margin on each one of those meals that we did. And so that's really what drove that fund balance through the roof, right? So.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you. Mr. Robichaud?
Mr. Chair, thank you. Probably the good news with that fund balance is you don't foresee any raising food cost lunch prices in the near future.
That is correct. That is I guess maybe the one positive. We haven't raised food prices in 21. We didn't do it in 22. We didn't do it in 23. And based on this, we aren't going to do it in 24 either. So that's 4 years of those people that do have to pay for meals based on their application, a flat dollar amount in that area.
Thank you.
So,
Mr. Olson?
Go ahead.
Yeah, so we don't have any equipment needs? I mean, people have gone through that.
Yeah, Mr. Olson, that's a good question. There are a few things that we buy every year that amounts to $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 maybe. In that budget right now, I have $175,000 that I'm hoping to spend this year, and I'm pretty sure I probably am not going to get there, just based on I'm not going to buy a new stove just to buy a new stove, right? Or not going to buy a new dishwasher just to buy a new dishwasher. We've tried to buy a lot of things that I've requested permission from MDE because they have to approve all purchases, and I have got a lot of no's. So for this reason or that I probably won't go into here, in the boardroom. So.
Mr. Chair, thank you. One other thing, I assume that any allocation of time spent, custodial, supervisor in the lunchroom, all those costs have been allocated to the food service to the point where we can't do it anymore.
So, Mr. Robichaud, if you remember, and this was before my time, but not too much before my time.
Ask me what I did yesterday, and I probably could have.
We actually went through a full food service audit. And one of the things that we got dinged for at that time was trying to allocate too much administrative time to the food service account. And we were forced to make a corrective journal entry. If I recall, it was in excess of $200,000, which, again, to your question earlier, that helped a little bit with the fund balance as well. So just to kind of put things in perspective, we can allocate custodial time as long as we document when they were in the kitchen. Not the lunchroom. We can't write off what's in the lunchroom. Only when they are physically in the kitchen area cleaning. Lunch tables, right? Everybody uses lunch tables to eat on, right? But that's not an eligible expense. We can't write off new lunch tables for any of our...
Why not?
Because that is the state statute. I have argued it and argued it and argued it, and even the in-wall kind, right? You know, nobody walks into a gym and pulls out a table to do homework on. That just doesn't happen. I don't get anywhere. Just recently, I tried to get 2 new makeup air units, right? That are, Richard, as you know, are specifically used for a kitchen. And I got I'm sorry, this is denied, right? Because it's part of the building, even though it's specific to the kitchen. Bad debt is another thing, right? You would think you could write off bad debt to the food service account, but nope, sorry, we can't do that either. So there's a lot of things that we're really restricted on because it's federal dollars. And as you can tell by my comments, it's very frustrating that our hands are tied. So Chris hears a lot of whining and complaining next door.
Mr. Robichaud?
Mr. Chair, thanks. I would suspect one of the arguments for the government side is that the cafeterias, as they're known, are used as a multi-purpose room, not specifically just for lunch purposes. A lot of schools use tables for homework, for study halls. So it isn't just a lunchroom, it's a multi-purpose room. So.
That is the argument, right? You're absolutely right. Mr. Olson?
Yeah, when you mention like makeup air, which deals with the kitchen, if there's no kitchen, no makeup air. It's like a stove or.
Yep.
I don't think we have deep fryers anymore, do we?
You're looking at the wrong person. I don't know.
No, there's no more deep fryers.
But that's.
So I argued that for a better part of 2 months before I just threw up the white flag and gave up because it wasn't going to happen. So.
Appreciate your comments. We get it.
Yeah.
You're trying.
Right. So don't look for a big deficit in the fund two come the end of the year. I'm just going to put that up front. So.
Thank you.
Yep. Any other questions with the revised budget that you guys have for fiscal year?
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Mr. Olson.
Yes. Has there been any talk about raising, from 9.5 to something, maybe increase that, or I don't know. I mean, it just.
I think if you could hold that question, sorry to keep kicking you down the road, to the another conversation that we'll have here in a little bit. I think we'll answer that question for you in a subsequent presentation.
Any other questions for Mr. Gerdes or Mr. Nelson? Okay, this is an action item, so I will entertain an approval for the fiscal year 2022-2023 revised budget.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Robichaud, a second by Ms. Steves. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 7-0. This brings us to item 9D2, consider approval of fiscal year 24 comparison of enrollment projection final. Mr. Gerdes.
We'll wait just briefly here till it comes up on the screen. Again, we'll be looking at some spreadsheets with some smaller numbers. There we are. So for those of you who have been around for a few years, you'll recognize this model. I used it last year. It was used several years prior to me in this position. But for the new board members, I am going to walk you through this. This looks like on the onset a lot of numbers, and it is, but there is a method to what we have here. So what you see on the screen, it's kind of color-coded and also numericalized with the ones, the twos, the threes, and the fours, are 4 different working models for enrollment projections. The first model, number 1, is a model that was developed by our financial advisor. Last year, for those of you that can remember that far back, we had 5 different variations of that model. And I took 3 of those off because they were kind of out there, right? They weren't even close. So there's 2 left there. The next 4 are, again, a different model. Those first 2 are both based on birth rates in the county. The second model really has 4 different variations to them, all of them being relatively close to each other within 10, 12 percentage points. And you can see the numbers as we go down the chart there. Number 3 is some data that they give us from the Department of Education. And I will specify that the Department of Education data is very outdated. So we use that one really with a grain of salt, right? And that's why there's only one version of that, because it isn't necessarily terribly reliable. And then, again, the kind of the greenish one there in number 4 is a model that is provided by our accounting software platform. So if you put those all into perspective, I'm going to shrink mine down here a little bit, and you go over to the right, a good statistician, of which I probably am not, usually always takes the bottom one and the top one out, right, as anomalies, right? So you'll see that in those 2 yellow numbers there, the first one and the 6th one over, right? And so those numbers, those averages are represented in the blue column there off to the right with a total of 3190. If you average all 8 numbers in there, you get a number of 3190.8. So we look at those and compare the numbers, that's a variance of less than one ADM, and so that's pretty dang close, right? So for this working model, 3190 is what we're going to project for fiscal year 24. Now, the other piece that we did with this is we enhanced the models, all right, to try and close that gap, Richard, to your point earlier, by 0.03%. Now, while that doesn't sound like a lot, it does add up to a handful of kids over the working models. So hopefully that we can narrow that gap and minimize the waves to just little tides, right? Okay?
But still, you want to underestimate.
Yep.
Like a safety factor?
Yep, and this will bring us in south of hopefully where we are, right? Again, it's all based on historical numbers, right? So we can't project what we don't know. We can only project off of what the numbers tell us, right? And then as we slide down, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on these, in which we probably can't do with this document. You might need to do that, or maybe NASCO can slide this down. We look at the next 4 years, so fiscal year 25, fiscal year 26, fiscal year 27, and fiscal year 28. And if you look at the numbers, again, in the green, we go from 3190 to 3144 to 3081 to 3057. And if I can foresee 5 years out, we are going to be at 3046. Okay? And then NASCO, if you could slide to the very end, you will see this put into a chart form. You will see the last 3 years of a historical data. You will see the current year that we are in now. Again, that's not based on the budget. That is based on actual numbers, 3268. Again, being conservative. And then you can see the historical number, the historical run out for 24 to 28. So you can kind of see there as it gets towards the end that is starting to flatten out a little bit, right? And that we can maybe kind of see an end to the large drop-offs and settle with 30, 40 kids a year. So, any questions on the enrollment projection model? Again, the reason we go out 5 years is what we're going to talk about next is a 5-year forecast. So we tie these numbers into a 5-year forecast. That'll be the next thing that Chris and I will be discussing today. Any questions? Sorry, Kathy, my back's turned to you.
Board members, any questions? Okay, hearing nothing, this once again is an action item. So I will entertain a motion for the approval of the fiscal year 24 comparison of enrollment projection final.
Mr. Chair, I'll so move.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Bellingham, a second by Ms. Boudreau. Any further discussion?
Mr. Goodes and Mr. Nelson, I'd like to thank you. I think they're very accurate with your particular models and looking at history now or whatever. So I think you're coming closer and closer, and you've done a great job. So thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to thank you for bringing all this exciting stuff to the board meeting.
Right. Well, we're not even half done yet.
Okay, we do have a motion. We have a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion passes 7-0. Thank you. That brings us to item 9D3. This is a report. Consider approval of 5-year forecast. I do have a question. So if this is just a report, we're not acting on this at this time? It's just you're giving us guidance on it?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, I don't think there's any reason, we don't need to.
Okay, thank you.
approve this, do we? I don't think we do either. So, we're gonna start this, I'm gonna start this, Chris and I are gonna tag team this one together. So, I'm gonna start with, a document that I showed, when I was sitting at home in the snowstorm, and you guys were all here in the boardroom, and I was kind of sitting behind Miss Linda over there, and I really couldn't see anybody. But this is a document, that we gave you a first glance at, on the January 3rd meeting. And what this shows is that we stay, oops, I apologize here. I'm trying to drive off of mine. We stay, pretty flat for 23 and 24, right? Because that's kind of what the numbers show us, and we'll talk more about that into the next one. And then in 25, 26, 27, and 28, the whole thing falls out, right? And you can see the yellow line fund balance is somewhere south of $20 million in the hole in 5 years, okay? If we slide down a little bit, it kind of gives us a snapshot of, on the second page, of what the revenue is doing. And so it's easier to see. I think we can go like this. And you can see that in 22, the revenue was way up, again, because of ESSER. In 23, it falls off a little bit, again, because of ESSER. In 24, it's pretty flat, and we're going to talk about compensatory funding in a little while. And then from there, you can see kind of a general fall off in the revenue, right, over time. We go down to the expenses. Again, our expense model really says in 23, we have less ESSER money that we're spending, so there's less ESSER expenses that go along with it, right? But then from there, all of our expenses gradually climb, right, really due to inflation. Salaries, contracts, as Chris alluded to earlier, we're a service-driven organization, okay? So what we have here is our own little snapshot of the same model that Chris put together, but this one changes a little bit because we used the enrollment projections that we just presented to the board, right? So as we look at this number, we are now north of $20 million instead of south of $20 million because we have more kids that we're projecting going forward. Okay? Any questions on this? But if you look at this, again, you look at the fund balances, we're looking at 11.2, 12.1, and then a fall off of 4.8, and then from there, all. Okay? So I'm going to turn it over to Chris. He's going to wrap up this so you can kind of see what we need to do here. So.
Thanks, Scott. So for this one, I took the same data, the same ADM, the same revenue, and I just, when there was a drop-off, trued up the expense so that the fund balance wouldn't get below 9.5% board policy. And this is what it looks like. You can see instead of the drop-off previously there at 4.8 in 25, we hold steady at 9.5 just by cutting expense each year. And you can see along the bottom there, if you can read the smallish font, what the expense is at for all those years. But the big impact here is the next one. This is the reductions needed from the first of those three slides to the second one to get it to that 9.5. These are cumulative. So say 2026, the 5,027,000 doesn't mean cutting 5,027,000 after 25. It includes that 1.664, and just the difference would need to be a cut in 26. But out through 28, the total across all years would be 7.5.
I mean, because Richard's looking confused over there. And
Okay, with the ESSER funds, we hired a lot of people. And it was my understanding that in 3 years, we would have to let them go because there's no ESSER money. Now, is that figured in here, or what? Or are we keeping those people on with, again, my understanding that hopefully they were told you're only going to be here for 3 years, whatever job they were doing. So that's my question.
thanks, Chris. So, to answer your first question, those cuts are built into this model that Chris has put in, right? So 22, 23, 24, pretty flat, right? 25, ESSER funds are gone, right? So as you see on the model here that Chris has worked up, that's, part of that 1.6. To answer the second part of your question, Richard, is we're trying to kind of move away, and I'm having a hard time with it too, but moving it really away from ESSER funding and talk about federal funding, right? The federal funding is going to go away. So while we do need to make cuts based on the hiring of staff, those cuts aren't necessarily tied to the ESSER funds or the federal funds. Does that make sense? And we'll talk about that in the very next presentation.
To me, it doesn't make sense, because I thought we got all millions of dollars for 3 years, and I don't know if we're reaching our goals after 3 years before the pandemic yet. That's the big question for Jamie there, is that,
Right.
Are we reaching our
And
goals before pandemic or not?
Would you like for me to speak on that now?
Whatever procedure
maybe you
is.
just hold off till the next one. Are you okay with that?
Mm-hmm.
So, Mr. Gertis, let me ask a slightly different version of Mr. Olson's question. We hired certain staff with the ESSER/federal funds, right? COVID dollars, whatever we're calling them here tonight. That's what they are, right?
Yep.
Just because we hired those people with those dollars doesn't mean that those exact people or that exact position will necessarily be reduced as we move forward with reductions as they're needed. Is that correct?
Yes.
Is that safe to say?
Yes.
So I don't know if that's asking his question slightly differently or not. Yes, if we got $2 million from ESSER and or federal dollars, those $2 million aren't going to be there going forward, right? I mean, those go away because they were one-time funds to catch up, whatever you want to call it. That's all accurate?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mr. Olson, I don't know if
I
that
guess
helps or confuses.
I'm trying to, what you said is that of the staff hired with the ESSER funds, then that staff will be laid off. Maybe each year, or definitely at the third year, they shouldn't be here, right, or not?
I think, I'll try this again, and I think where Chad was going with his comment is we need to make cuts to a specific dollar amount, not necessarily to the subset of people that were hired with the federal dollars originally.
So we would be making cuts equivalent to whatever that amount is, right?
Correct.
But through 3 years in general attrition, you may have people that have retired, or we have maybe found a new program or new support system that helps move the needle more than we had before, and maybe our leadership team says, this is really important, we really value this, we're getting great bang for our buck, so we're not going to go back to the way it was prior or something of that nature, right? We could also have people who have retired, people who have moved on or whatever. So yes, I think from what I'm hearing, you go back to that dollar amount, not necessarily position, person, whatever. So.
And the other thing that I didn't mention, and I'll mention it now before I give this back over to Chris, is that the models that Chris and I put together here only do assume 1.5% on the model, on the funding formula.
From the state.
From the state, as well as 3.5% annual increases. Now, we all have heard, right, that the governor's plan includes much more than that. That is not factored into this model as it is shown here today, because this was done before the governor announced his plans.
Talk to Jamie, and governor's plan will come out tomorrow?
On the 24th, his plan needs to be, by law, revealed, yes. The entire plan.
We'll know for our district, our share of that $17 billion?
Well, we will know what he is proposing, but what he is proposing and what is being brought to the legislative floor are not the same things. So what is being discussed on the floor of the legislature right now is not the same thing, dollar amount, that what the governor has proposed in his budget.
They're the same party.
Mr. Chair.
I'm just telling you, it's not the same thing.
Mr. Robichaud?
I appreciate the fact that you're projecting what's in current statute and not projecting money that we don't have in our bank account yet. So I think that's important. Once the legislators finish their work, if they ever do, then we can come back and revise the budget. But I don't think we need to use any projections of something that is way out there yet. So thank you for using what's in current statute.
So Jerry, just to clarify on that, current statute doesn't go past this year.
Right.
So
I understand.
we're being very conservative based on historical.
Historical
Yes.
legislature.
Yeah,
Thank you.
just to make sure we're on the same page.
Yep, thank you.
Mr. Chair, if I may, so just to put this in context for me, and this is how I'm interpreting this, you're proposing a reduction from what I see here of X amount here, correct, a pile of money. And what we're saying and what the board should be focused on is student achievement. And it's up then to the district to say, here are the programs we're going to reduce because this program is working and our students are achieving because of it. And the other ones may hurt, but it's up to leadership then to come forth with a plan of what is working. And some of the things that might have been funded by ESSER are working and still work and will continue to work, and other programs, maybe after examining them, doing the analysis, et cetera, from there. Am I correct on that? So it doesn't matter if you were hired by ESSER money or not, we're looking at the big picture here of what's working for student achievement, what's going to best benefit our students now and moving forward. Would that be correct?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. And just to be aware, and then I will let Chris finish here, is that we are going to talk about reductions here in the next agenda item. So I don't want to get too far into that road. This is really just setting the stage with what we believe the next 5 years, assuming what we assume, will look like, assuming nothing happens. And that's the charts that Chris will finish talking about.
I don't have that much left, just one. You have to bear with me a little while. This one with this really gigantic font. If you look at the second to bottom row of, is there a laser pointer on here? Is it worth anything?
Yeah, at the top.
Apparently that's a no. Okay. I don't think I can read it out here. So we have unassigned fund balance as a number of months of expenses. So if you start out at the 23 budget, you see we have like 1 1/3 months worth of assets in the balance. Next year goes up just a little tick to 1.35. But then at 25, there's that big drop off where that the slope started to go down. In 25, we're only anticipating 0.21 months of expenses in the fund balance. And then in 26, that drops down to, I believe that's negative 0.87. And then 27, negative 2.19 months. And finally, by 28, we are down a negative 3.6 months of expenses in the fund balance. And that's as it stands today, with no reductions.
Hence the reason we need to make reductions.
Correct, which we will talk about in a little bit, very little bit.
Thank you for blowing that up.
So, do we have any other questions really at the 5-year forecast that we presented, kind of the current state of the state, right? Or state of the school, or whatever.
Mr. Robichaud.
Mr. Chair, thank you. At what point do we reach statutory operating debt if we do nothing?
Sometime, I would say, by November of 2024.
Okay, thank you.
Assuming no cuts.
Assuming no cuts. Assuming nothing from the state legislature. Assuming nothing more than what our estimates show, yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions for, bless you, any other questions for Mr. Gerdes or Mr. Nelson? All right. Yes, go ahead, Mr. Olson.
So, with Jerry, we can't go negative. I mean, then the state, after a period of time, will come in and take over a district? What's the story on that?
So statutory operating debt is 2.5%. Based on what we've projected here, we would hit that, again, assuming no changes or no deductions, to Mr. Wolf's point. So, yeah, the board does need to act, but technically statutory operating debt is only calculated on June 30th, right? So we can go negative as long as we are back positive in positive territory by June 30th, right? Now, that's not a good practice, and we should never do that, but technically we could, right?
Okay. Thank you for that report. Next item is 9D4, consider approval of the district budget reduction recommendations. This is an action item. I will let I'll let you go ahead and discuss this first.
All right, thank you, Chad. So, this first slide that we have on the screen will bring about a little bit of good news, right? So we've had a little bit of bad news. So we're going to start with some good news, or continue on some good news here. So what you have on the screen is really a look at where we are today and where we think we need to be in terms of budget reductions, non-federal funds. So these are just general fund, non-federal budget reductions. Okay, so I'm going to go through this relatively slow. Please stop me if you have any questions whatsoever. So I'm going to go back to June of 22 when the school board approved the 23 adopted budget, which, as Mr. Nelson alluded to earlier, showed that we were going to lose $778,595. Okay, then we move into September. We had our audit, had the auditor come present the audit, and that showed that, hey, we all of a sudden finished $240,000 plus better. All right. We move into October. Mr. Rutherford came up and presented to you that, hey, we got this gift of $325,000 that we've talked about. In December, we magically came up with another $107,000. We increased our ADM by 85. You've heard me mention that twice now, to the tune of about $629,000. Along with that increase, we lose $305,743 to the PSEO contract, right, as a partial offset to that increased ADM. Talked about the savings of the bus route from Faribault Transportation Company of $63,000. The contracts we mentioned and then other board-approved items that have since happened since the adopted budget. That puts us in a revised budget that we presented about, an hour ago now, I suppose, of $128,310 in the hole. Okay? So I'm going to reference back then over to the right-hand side of that column, 2024. So Mr. Benty, myself, the school board went through the levy process, totaling roughly $1.8 million in cuts. The actual numbers, 1,775. You have there. We have a net increase, or just under 0.5% from 22. We have $410,000 increase from 23 so far. Okay? You subtract both those positive numbers off of the negative, we're still 1.124 and change in the hole. Everybody with me now? Okay? So, we're going to talk about compensatory funding. I'm going to stop here and explain compensatory funding. A couple new board members that probably aren't up to speed maybe with what compensatory funding is. So every year in the fall of the year, we go through a process in the district office and in all the school buildings. It's kind of a district-wide effort to get kids to fill out these free and reduced lunch applications. Okay? And what that does is it gathers financial information from the family, the number of people in the household, and it determines, do these kids in the household qualify for free and reduced lunch? Do they qualify for reduced lunch? So on and so forth. This year, for 2022, in the fall of 2022, the state was a pilot project for a federal initiative to use Medicaid data to qualify students for free and reduced lunch. Okay, is everybody with me when I say that? So when people apply for Medicaid, they have to fill out some form very similar to the free and reduced lunch application, and the Social Services Department collects all the financial data. That all gets reported to the state. The state then passed that on to the Department of Education. And the Department of Education qualified all these students based on their income from the Medicaid application. Okay?
Is that equal? Trying to understand, is that?
No, it's not.
You know, what I'm trying to say, you know.
I know exactly what you're trying to say. Are the qualifications for Medicaid equal to the qualifications for free and reduced lunch?
Right.
And that's not the case. To qualify for Medicaid, there's different categories, but you have to be at like 133% of the federal poverty level.
Are we losing money?
Losing money on lunch?
Yeah,
No. No.
because right now they're getting a free lunch, right?
Just hold on that question. Let me finish this, and I'll
sorry.
come back and pick up. I think I know what you're trying to ask me. So, to qualify for Medicaid, it's 133% of the federal poverty level. To qualify for free and reduced lunch, it's roughly 180% of the federal poverty level. Okay? So, what that did for the people in the Faribault School District was that we qualified hundreds and maybe even 1,000 more kids because of this pilot project. Okay? Now,
Is it equal though? Like one kid over here, one kid here, are they equal? I don't know if I said that right, but
I'm not sure I'm following exactly
Is
what you're
that-
saying, Mr. Olson. When they're equal.
a child fills out what was the free and reduced lunch, we get so much money for that child, right? And then now with Medicaid, the same, okay,
Yep.
now is it equal or?
Yes. So the compensatory funding is based on qualifications. It is not based on how you were qualified. Okay? So whether you filled out the application, whether you were qualified by the Medicaid program, whether you were qualified based on, there's about 6 or 7 other ways you can qualify. It doesn't matter. A compensatory student is a compensatory student.
So with the change, is this good for us?
Yes.
Oh.
Yeah, i.e. the positive news that I'll get to
Okay.
here in a second.
Ms.
So-
Boudreau, one second, Ms. Boudreau has a question.
Oh, I'm sorry. Throw
Excuse
something
me,
at me or
Mr.
something.
Mr. Curtis, I have a question. So we also have students that are eligible for the reduced lunches. They are not captured in this Medicaid survey, correct? Or are they?
They are.
They are?
They are.
Okay,
That is exactly right. There's 2 sets of guidelines
yes.
based on income thresholds, right? And both of them were picked up in the direct cert, whether they were free or reduced. Now, to Mr. Olson's point, in terms of compensatory kids, a free compensatory student is weighted heavier than a reduced compensatory student for funding by 50%, right? That's how that formula works. But what I'm looking at here is when we all finish the project, and actually this report that I have here was final as of January 11th, right? And again, this is revenue for next school year, right? Because it's a year ahead. We picked up $2,005,630 more in compensatory revenue in fiscal year 24 next year than what we currently have in fiscal year 23 today. So that's good news. Everybody smile. Yay. Right? Okay? $2 million more. All right? So if you net out the $1.1 million in the hole and the $2 million in enhanced compensatory funding, that leaves us a positive number. Okay? Again, good news. Happy.
Yeah.
Of $881,000 roughly. Okay? Now, we all know that we have the potential of a new charter school coming to Faribault in fiscal year 24. Okay? And while Mr. Bente's crystal ball is only as good as it is, they're open enrolling K-4. So what this formula is doing here is that, again, using the $8,000 per student, again, that's not all unrestricted, we could lose 110 students off of my enrollment projection and still be net neutral for fiscal year 24, general fund, non-federal funding. I'm going to stop there. And that was another mouthful. Anybody have any questions about this document you have in front of you? So the recommendation is that we don't make any cuts for general fund, non-federal dollars, fiscal year 24.
So you're assuming 0 from the state, right?
1.5%.
1 point. That's it.
So if we get 5, we pick up 3.5%.
Anything on the cross subsidies or no?
Just inflationary, 3.5% on cross subsidies.
We hope that your crystal ball is accurate.
Oh,
Right.
thank you.
We wrote that down. Yeah, it's written in stone that you said everything was going to be fine. So
Yeah, everything.
Mr. Gertis, just real quick, on the, how'd you pronounce it? Surad? Surad?
I'm open to that.
Sarad.
Surad.
Yes.
Okay, so if that number comes in lower than 110, in essence, we pick up additional money because we have less outflow, or that's wrong, less
No, that's right.
revenue going elsewhere. If it comes in at 112 students that enroll, obviously we're slightly in the hole. And just based on your best guess of K through 4, that's approximately 28 students per grade level.
No, that would be about, about 22 to 23 students
22,
per
I'm
grade
sorry,
level.
because that's 5 grade levels, not
Correct.
4. I'm sorry, thank you. K through 4. Okay,
So we went through a few years ago when we lost 100 students when they started the
STEM school?
STEM school. So we've gone through this. So that was about, well, it wasn't 8,000 per student back then, right?
No, probably a little less.
Yeah. So,
Okay,
Okay.
so that's this so far. There's
Okay.
another page?
Yep,
If I can pause you for just a second, we mentioned the 62,900 for the bus earlier. Did we mention that giving credit where it's due? That was identified and done, okay.
yep.
Sorry.
So, we're gonna flip the page here, okay, so if everybody can roll down. Now, we're gonna look at, the general fund federal dollars, okay? So, again, this is kind of split up in a fiscal year '23, the current state of the state, and fiscal year '24. So if we look at kind of our big buckets of money, right, ESSER 2 and ESSER 3, what we are spending today in the budget is roughly $3.3 million. And it is broken down as you see there on the top of the screen. What we would have left in the ESSER funds before they are gone is what you see on the right side of that page in fiscal year '24. Now, again, as I mentioned earlier, you don't see any 170 funding in '24 because that funding expires in fiscal year '23 and has to be spent this year. So, at a minimum, we need to cut $1.1 million. The recommendation is to step this down by 50% or half to prevent large reductions at the end of next year due to the end of the federal funding. Any questions? And that 50% of 3.3 million is roughly 1.66.
Mr. Robichaud.
Oh, he answered my question. I wasn't seeing where the 50% was that you were talking about.
So this is an action item. Mr. Benty, do you have anything you'd like to share on this, or pretty much just seconding everything
Yeah,
that they've
pretty much
said?
what Mr. Gertis said. What we're asking is, from the board, is for us to go back and put a plan together to cut 1.66 million out of the budget for next school year, or if the board decides to lower that number, with understanding that if you go below 1.1 million, we will be deficit spending again.
Mr. Robichaud.
Sure. Before any action is taken, and we probably could discuss it later, but that 1.6 is a result of that federal funds not coming back in 2 years. I need a clarification of what it is that we're cutting the 1.6. What I heard is that there are no cuts recommended in the general fund, non-federal dollars, state and local dollars, no cuts, but federal funds, 1.6 million. Is that?
That's correct.
I hear that correctly?
Yes.
So I believe the ask, if I'm understanding it correctly, is to identify a number as they've recommended. We will either approve or not approve that number. Leadership will then work over the next month or so to come back with a list of recommendations of what that looks like and what the effects of those cuts will be and where. And then from there, the board would approve or not approve. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, so this does not take into account if the state really comes through, right?
Correct. Again, this is all based on 1.5% on the formula.
But if we cut somebody and we get the money from the state, what do we do?
That's a very good question.
I thought it was be a good question.
It is, and that is one of the reasons that we have decided to go this route with it, is by zeroing out the general fund and putting our reductions into the ESSER federal pot. It allows us a little bit more time and a little bit more flexibility, and Scott doesn't like it when I say this, but if we have to push a little bit to next year, budget-wise, to wait out the legislature, we can. We can't push a lot, but we can push some.
Good.
So it gives us a little bit more time to make some of our decisions.
Because we have a date of keeping people, was it April something?
April 1st?
April.
Nicole?
April 15th.
The actual date is June 30th, but we have to work backwards from when board meetings are, so we try and aim for the end of March.
And unfortunately, our calendar doesn't really line up great with the state legislature's calendar. So
No,
it's
and
just the way
actually,
it is.
some of the reading that I was doing today around the legislature, some of the thoughts that are out there is that they're going to package this all in one legislative bill, and it won't be until possibly April or May before it's passed. So I don't think we will have any bills that have been passed or guaranteed by the time March rolls around for us to really bank on.
Mr. Obshaw.
Chair, I think if I can just respond, I've always found that it's easier to add back at a later date than it is to cut at a date that's passed and we can't do anything. So, in response to your question, if the legislature does come through with some additional funds that we had anticipated, we can always take a look at those cuts that have been made and call back those staff if it's staff persons.
Other questions before I entertain a motion to approve the 1.66 million as recommended by leadership?
So moved.
Hang on. That's a motion?
Yes.
Yes, okay. For the 1.66
Yes,
million. Okay,
correct.
thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Robsha. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion by Mr. Robshaw, a second by Mr. Bellingham. Any further discussion? One question, would we anticipate seeing your list of your proposal list, if you will, in February at our work session or more of our board meeting? Kind of walk us through that timeline, if you would.
With today being the 23rd and our work session, I believe, is on the 6th, that's a pretty tight turnaround. We can see what we can do. We can at least have some ideas.
Okay.
But I know that there's other options that the board would like to entertain as well, and those might take a little bit longer for us to put together.
So then, assuming we don't get everything or in-depth at the work session, safe to say that this board won't be asked to have a final approval at the February meeting, because we'll be getting that information. We'll probably be asking a fair amount of follow-up questions and whatnot. Is that fair to say? So we would look to finalize at our March session? Is that pretty safe to say? Unless we add a session in there.
Yeah.
Okay, which we certainly can. We've done before.
But I think this year, we got to look at the calendar on when the board meeting is in March, don't we? And when spring break is. So
Board
we,
meeting falls during the week of spring break.
Okay, we'll have to look at that, and that could be moved if need
it may
be.
change some of our historical practices around notifying people.
Yeah, and maybe we want to move that board meeting up. I don't know what everybody's schedule looks like, but we certainly have plenty of time between
My
now
guess
and
is
then.
that we're going to need another work session in between the February business meeting and the March business meeting.
Okay.
Mr.
yes,
Chair, if I may, so Mr. Benty, could you clarify when you said the board might have some other options as well? I'm not aware of any options or anything like that. And I saw a couple board members nod their head in agreement with that. So is that
So one of the,
something
I mean, and I'm just talking about historical pieces when I sat on the other side of the room in here. The board has entertained moving away from neighborhood schools and going and rebanding. So that's a possibility that we can look at to see how much funding is saved by doing that. looking at other alternatives around our enrollment in case we are able to potentially close a building. So those are all possibilities that we need to look at as well. We were looking tonight to get a number from the board so that then we have a goal to shoot for.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Appreciate that.
Thank you. Okay, any other questions? All right, hearing no further discussion, we have a motion by Mr. Robichaud, a second by Mr. Bellingham. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 7-0. Thank you for the in-depth report there. The next item is item 9D5, property tax levy update for fiscal year 25, information only.
So I know a lot of you sat and listened to Chris and I talk for an hour or so, not more than a month ago, around the Truth and Taxation meeting. One of the things that I want to put on the board's radar has to do with our property tax neutrality. And so I'm going to walk through a few slides here to kind of talk to you about where we are. So what you have on the screen in front of you is a snapshot slide from the Truth and Taxation meeting as a basis for the conversation this evening. So this is a copy of the 2022 Pay 23 fiscal year 24 debt service fund property tax levy. And so what you see there is two debt services. The first one in the amount of $2.142 million is for our debt that goes way back to the late 1990s for what I believe to be was work done at the high school and a few other buildings. The second one that you see there is our abatement bond, our 2019A abatement bond that we talked about just earlier tonight for the parking lot work that was done about 3 years ago and then just recently used up for the Jefferson Elementary School. So those are the two pieces that we have in our debt service fund. All right, if you look at the next slide is actually a amortization schedule for the 2017A bond. And what you will see is this bond, again, more good news, is successfully paid off on the 1st of February 2024, so about a year from now, okay? And with that, it frees up some space in our property tax levy. Now, the one thing I do want to clarify is you can see here that this payment is $2,040,000. It doesn't necessarily tie to the $2.142 million that I have listed here. The reason for that is we always levy by state statute for 5% more on bonds than the actual payment itself. And that is to pick up any other smaller expenses, arbitrage calculations, payment bills, and different things like that. Okay? So as we look at this debt will be paid off. And this debt amounts to just over $2 million of the $11 million that we asked the voters to approve in December of last year. Okay? So to put this into a pictorial for you, and this is probably a little easier to see, is that this bar graph represents our current debt load. All right? So we have in there the school building bonds, which I just talked about, our abatement bonds, which are the green, our lease levy, and any proposed debt, which is at zero. Okay? So this is what it looks for today. So you can see, again, in 2024, right in front of Jerry, is the final payment in fiscal year 24. Okay? Which, again, is next year. All right? the goal really is to keep, is to really keep our property tax neutral if we have enough projects that warrant that. So this is just an example that illustrates that we could do a almost $29 million project and not raise the taxes to the taxpayers of this district once that debt is paid off. Now, this might not be quite so accurate anymore with interest rates going up and up and up, but it just gives you a snapshot of what is possible with the debt capacity that we will have in 2025. Okay, so I'm going to stop there. Does anybody have any questions so far?
Mr. Olson.
This has been a kind of thorn in my side a little bit, is that we can actually lower the taxes to the people if we don't spend that $2 million. I think it's needed, but I'm just saying, it is, are we keeping the tax there artificially high?
So
That's a decent question, but keeping it, but we need needs in the buildings, of course.
So we're going to, again, in our 7th presentation of the evening between Chris and I, we're going to talk about the building needs assessment. Our current building needs assessment sits at right around $40 million. So I would say we have the need. And to answer your question, Richard, and I know you and I have talked about this, right, is that I don't think we are really keeping our taxes high. I think we are probably doing good due diligence to try and maintain some of our buildings before they completely fall apart. And I'm going to have Mr. Smith, who hopefully is still in the back of the room here yet, join me after a little bit, but he will attest to the fact that last year his maintenance budget actually went over because we are continuing to fix and fix and fix and fix. And a lot of that gets prevented if we do the right things on the front end. But we'll save that for the next presentation. So what we are currently looking at is to not obviously go out 20 years, but to create a 5-year project with different needs of this district that we'll talk about shortly, in order to maintain our property tax numbers, address upwards of $12-13 million of that $40 million, and not have to raise the property taxes to our taxpayers here in the school district.
Can we go out further than 5?
So this is something that Mr. Gertis and I talked about. We can go out up to 20. The issue is then we're really kind of locked into that amount of money and those projects, not necessarily knowing what our physical needs will be for the district in 20 years. So the idea for 5 was really around, will we need another building in 5 years? Will our enrollment continue to flatten off? Will it grow? Will it decline more? We'll have much more data to make a much more sound decision in the next 5 years, so that then we can better be fiscally responsible with the taxpayer money and not take too much from it.
So we could do 5 years, whatever.
Exactly. Yes.
Okay.
So I think what you're saying provides a fair amount of flexibility.
Yes. Yeah. So the other thing that I just want to talk about is some potential ways to fund this 5-year project or projects, right? So the board has a couple different options in front of them. I will briefly discuss those and the ups and downs of each, right? So the first one, and probably the best alternative is facility maintenance bonds, also known as LTFM bonds. That is run through our existing LTFM restricted fund balance. The taxpayers, again, it's based on net tax capacity. It is not based on referendum market value. So the taxing structure to the individuals would be the same, right, as what is falling off. Bonds and LTFM bonds would be the same taxing authority, if you remember that from a month ago. And it's also subject to the ag credit. So our farmers in the community would get their ag credit like they do today for the existing debt that is on the books.
And we got also the long-term funding, right, from the state.
Yes,
So that's on top of this.
that is correct. Yep. So by doing this, we actually free up some of our 10-year plan to do maybe other things that we can't necessarily do with an LTFM bond.
So do we know a figure with what you're proposing?
Yep. Again, for the third time, I'm going to have to ask you to wait one more session. Sorry, you're always ahead of me, right? But yes, we do have those in the next presentation that we have. So that is probably the best option, right? But we are limited. So the downside to an LTFM bond, we're limited to HVAC. We are limited to any fire suppression or fire alarm systems, and we are limited to asbestos. Okay? Now, we don't believe we have a lot of asbestos in the school, so we're really talking about, and you'll see this in the next section, we're really talking about air handling units, HVAC, and fire alarm. We could do a lease levy if we wanted to, but we would be limited to a smaller dollar amount, right? So a lease levy isn't really something that would be that would work for us based on that $2 million number that we have in place. Same with capital notes, kind of the same thing. It's not really a good viable source. So really, what we have that's really a solid structure, and what most districts use are LTFM bonds or facility maintenance bonds, and one and the same. Okay? Again, something for the board to think about, but just to put it into a timeline. In order for this to happen and to make our fiscal 25 property tax levy, it has to be on the 2023 levy, pay 24, fiscal year 25. So it has to be done by this fall in order to make the property tax levy that the board will certify in early December. Okay? Which means our deadlines are somewhere in that June, July timeframe or earlier. Okay? So just keep that in the back of your head. We will have more information in the near future. Okay? Again, any questions on kind of the property tax neutrality, if that's a word? It is now. Okay? All right.
That concludes that
That concludes that.
presentation. Okay, thank you. So that brings us to item 9D6, consider approval of building needs assessment. Thank you, Mr. Nelson.
So, did Kane fall asleep? Or? All right. Okay. So, the last thing that I am going to talk about tonight, and I promise I'll be done, is kind of a snapshot of our building needs assessment. So last fall, the board approved going out and hiring ISG to do a needs assessment of all of our facilities. So ISG came out and spent a couple months probably putting all of this data together. And so we've tried to summarize this for you in a couple different charts. So the original needs assessment is this first page that you have in front of you here. And this breaks it down by building, with the appropriate dollar amount, okay? So you can look at the bottom of just south of $38 million on this. And Kane has already pulled out all of the properties that we aren't directly responsible for in this number. The original needs assessment was over 40 million. Okay, so any questions on page one? And then just a simple bar graph, and you can see that the middle school and the high school rise to the top of this list, mostly because they're the biggest buildings we have, right?
Gentlemen,
At the end of the day.
that number of roughly 38 million doesn't mean that all 38 million need to or should be done tomorrow. That's,
Yeah,
that's
I'm gonna get.
You're getting to it? Okay, thank you.
No, you're jumping ahead.
Now I'm jumping ahead, sorry.
All right. Okay, so the next slide, okay, that we have on here, Chad, to your point, is our priority one. So priority one are all the needs that really should be done within the next 5 years. Okay, 3 years. Okay, sorry. So again, you can see roughly $11 million in priority one needs that should be done soon. Okay, and again, you look at where those buildings are. We have the middle school and the ALC. Okay. If you flip down to the next page, we go to priority two. All right, and those should be done in the next 6 years. Okay, and again, $18 million, and you can see the allocation across the buildings. Okay. And if you slide down to the next page, those are the priority three things that we just need to kind of keep on the radar that will need to be done sometime in the next 10 plus years. We didn't rehearse beforehand. So, and again, you can see the middle school and the high school rise to the top of that list as well.
Question, with this, you're putting money into the ALC building, right?
No, what we're saying is that there is a large need to put money in the ALC building or come up with a plan B or C.
That's what I was saying, that put
Right.
money in to a building that really should not,
Yep.
it wouldn't be worth it.
Those are future, soon-to-be conversations.
Okay.
All right, and then if we look at kind of the recommendations, so Richard, again, to your question that you were ahead of me on, if we look to the last slide here, you can see that we have broke this down by priority one, priority two, and some priority three. Now, you can see on here that all of these projects listed either all revolve around HVAC or they revolve around fire alarm, life safety issues. Okay? So this total list here, which you can't see because of that box, is just over $13 million. Okay? At the bottom of the screen in the lower right. Okay? Again, and then on the left side of the page is summarized based on level 1, level 2, and level 3. Okay?
So anything beyond HVAC and fire systems, you can't use this money or what?
We can't use LTFM bonds for. So LTFM bonds can only be used for HVAC, life safety, and asbestos.
And how do we finance the other stuff? Like
If-
new windows, for
Yep,
example?
yep, that's a great question. If we free up our current existing 10-year plan on LTFM funding, we can then allocate that funding without restrictions to new windows and doors or a new roof or whatever else, that rises to the top, right? But if you look at this entire needs assessment, a majority of it falls into HVAC or life safety, right? Or parking lot stuff and some other things that maybe don't rise to the level of need as some of the others. Okay? So, do I have any questions on this? So, based on this list, this is how we propose to move the projects forward, again, to the earlier conversation, to maintain that debt or neutrality and kind of keep that flat as we move forward and push those red bars off to the right a few years, right? And to Mr. Bente's point, then reassess what we need to do in 5 years, and then at that point in time, what rises to the top of the needs list.
Question for Mr. Smith. On this page here, whoop, that was just up, sorry, it went away. But the life safety dash fire, that's the fire system? Is that right?
System,
So some of them have a 2 next to them, some of them have a 3. We would want to do them all at one time, would we not? I mean, you can't have a different system in a different building, can you? It's all got to be tied together, or am I wrong on that?
Correct. The biggest upgrade on those would be a voice evacuation system, which is now code. It was not code when we upgraded the fire systems 3-4 years ago.
So for right now, we're grandfathered in, if you will?
We are. But it's a good idea to bring them up to code and have them all at the same level.
Can we actually pull a permit and do all this other work on the HVAC system without being up to code?
Well, we're up to code on HVAC.
No, but don't you typically, if we're grandfathered in and not up to code on the fire, if you will, because that code has changed,
Yep.
Can we actually pull a permit to do all the other work without being up to code?
I believe we can.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I believe we can on that.
Gotcha, okay.
I think it's just new systems are requiring the voice evacuation.
Okay.
not-
So your recommendation, as we sit here tonight, would be to do this entire page for just under 13.1 million. That's estimates and assuming that's all accurate, but
Absolutely. Right?
Okay.
If we use the simple logic that we have $2 million a year for 5 years, that's $10 million, right? Simple math. You've got an interest component in that, right? So I don't know what bonds are selling for, but there's gonna be 4 or 5% interest on bonds, right? Tax exempt bonds. So maybe you can only spend $9 million, $9.2 million, right, roughly. Again, to your point, Chad, these are estimates,
Okay.
right? They have certain inflationary figures built into them. Whether those inflationary figures are accurate or not, who knows, right? At the end of the day, that number changes every time we turn around. So we would start with this list, prioritize what we need, and then figure out what we can get done based on that. But this would be the pool that would start the prioritization of the work to be done.
thank you.
This will be presented to the facility in detail at some point, or a few sessions, right?
I think once we have a solid go-ahead from the board, right? Yes.
Okay.
The details of these projects will be brought forward to the facilities
Okay.
committee, right? As we move a little farther down the process. And to the finance committee as well, for those of you who say.
Any other questions here, board members, for Mr. Gerdes, Mr. Smith, or Mr. Bente regarding this? So what would you say, what's next steps? So you presented to the board, we've certainly had a few questions. What's next step to continue to move this along? What does that look like?
I think what we need to do is, bring it back to a subsequent board meeting, whether that's February or March, and get board approval. From there, then we engage financial consultants, right, to line up bond sales, right, because that takes a process to do that. Get the numbers put in place, get the projects prioritized by the facilities committee and whoever is going to figure that all out, right? And then move ahead with trying to get that work done so it makes the property tax levy by the end of the school year.
Board members, does that make sense? Mr. Olson first.
Yeah, is there grants out there we can apply for?
So, as long as you bring that up, myself and Mr. Smith and Kerry in his office and ISG are just finalizing a grant to the Department of Energy for roughly $4 million to see if we can garner some money from a grant to upgrade a lot of these similar items through this. So that's kind of how I spent my weekend, is writing grant documents for this. And we're actually going to get together tomorrow, finalize it up, and then we have to submit it by Wednesday of this week. So yes, that's the current grant initiative that we are working on here, along with our ISG partners that helped us out with some of the needs assessment data for the grant.
Mr. Robichaud.
Just a two-part question. Number one is, we would need action item on the list that you've given us, priorities 1, 2, and 3, on the fiscal improvement. Is there an action item that needs to be taken for the levy neutrality?
Yes, so the board would need to approve a resolution to go out and sell LTFM bonds to take on that additional debt. The board will also need to, I think, approve the bond sales when they are complete as well. I think those are the two things that, along with all the other formalities that are required, we have to have a public hearing and then some of the other things, that are required for those sales.
Thank you.
Okay. Board members, final opportunity for any questions on this? Thank you. We appreciate the information.
Scott excused?
Wow. For now.
Or I'm leaving, one or the other.
That brings us to item 10, Policy Committee. 10A are the minutes from the December 6, 2022 meeting. That's simply a report. Board members that are on that Policy Committee, is there anything you would like to share with us? I realize that was last year and before the new board was seated, but if there's anything you'd like to share?
Just the minutes from the meeting is
Okay.
all there is, and what we did, and who was there and who wasn't, whatever, so yeah.
Okay, thank you. Brings us to item 10B, the 2023 District Policy Committee schedule. Once again, all that is a schedule out there. Anything, anybody would like to share there? It's out in front of us. Everybody can see it, so if there's nothing, we'll move on to item 10C. 10C1 and 10C2. The following policies are presented for the first reading. Policy 524, Internet Acceptable Use and Safety Policy and Form, and Policy 534, School Meals Policy. Those are simply for the first reading. Is there any questions that anybody would like to ask on those, or board members you want to that are on that policy committee? Anything you'd like to point out?
Correct me if I'm wrong, go ahead, Cassie. Statute, I think statute and MSBA guidelines.
Yeah.
Statute changes what we went through there, yes.
Yeah, I believe the one around the internet acceptable use has some educational and data practices updates that have become statute. And the one around school meals came in November from Keith Ellison saying that there could no longer be alternative meals. We were not currently practicing that anyway, so by adopting that policy, it doesn't change anything for us.
And there was a healthy discussion for both of those in November.
I didn't hear what you said.
Can you repeat that?
Oh, healthy discussion with all policy board members present.
Okay, thank you. So that brings us to item 10D, and I believe this is an action item because we're considering rescission. So consider rescission of the following policies: Policy 304.9, sabbatical leave, and Policy 401.6, employee personnel file requirements. I will entertain a motion to consider the rescission of both of those in one motion. We have a motion by Ms. Steves. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second by Ms. Moore. Any further discussion on these two policies?
Well, Mr. Chair, for transparency here, both of those, or should I say sabbatical leave is covered in individual group contracts, I believe. And then, and both of these were not MSBA recommended policies. They're from, I think one was 79 and 78. So both these are covered in what HR has and what's in that. So, and done very well too, so.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. We have a motion by Ms. Steves, a second by Ms. Moore. Any further discussion? All right, hearing none. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 7-0. Thank you. Brings us to item number 11, other matters. 11A, consider approval of employment contract with Craig English. I will entertain a motion to approve.
Mr. Chair, I'll so move.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Bellingham, a second by Mr. Robichaud. The document's out in front of you. Mr. Benty, is there anything you'd like to say on this?
No, Kane, do you want to talk about this at all or not? Okay. Do you have any questions? This is replacing a resignation that was back at the end of last school year, or excuse me, at the end of last year.
Calendar year. Yep. Mr. Olson.
This position didn't exist before the pandemic, right? This has only been 3-4 years.
Come on forward, Mr. Smith.
Oh.
Thank you.
So we actually started the process of hiring this person before the pandemic. Just so happened to take over the COVID duties for us when the pandemic hit. But that was not the intent of this position.
How long have we had this position?
And just before COVID, so 3 years, around there?
Because why do we need this position?
The main goal of this position was to have an in-house health and safety rather than a service contract with an outside vendor.
So, Mr. Smith, if you were to, I mean, clearly it's a recommendation here. The staff, the leadership team is in favor of it. That's why you're recommending it. Net, by having it in-house, do you feel it's a savings versus outside contracts? Or is there added benefit other than just savings by having somebody in-house?
We're close to a savings when we eventually when we eliminate the outside vendor. I think we still got 1 year on the contract, 1 or 2 years. The biggest benefit is just having an inside person that takes care of all of our health and safety stuff, our lead and water, our indoor air quality. Probably 40 things that this person would do. But you just get a better service, in my opinion, when it's in-house.
Okay. Thank you. Other discussion, other questions? We do have a motion by Mr. Bellingham and a second by Mr. Robichaud. Okay, hearing none. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Motion passes 6-1. Next item is number 11B. Consider approval of employment contract with Shane Gunderson. I'll entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
A second.
We have a motion by Ms. Steves, a second by Ms. Boudreau. Any further discussion? Mr. Benty, anything you'd like to add here?
So this is our contract with Mr. Gunderson to be our interim activities director for the remainder of this school year, with the departure of our previous activities director who went to another district. So we're excited to have Mr. Gunderson. He's a graduate of Faribault High School, a lifelong resident of Faribault. So we're excited to have him step into this role.
Thank you for that. Any other discussion? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 7-0. Thank you. This brings us to item 11C, consider approval of agreement with local number 70 educational assistant contract. I will entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
We have a motion by Mr. Robichaud. Do we have a second?
I'll second, Mr. Chair.
We have a second by Mr. Bellingham. Any further discussion on this item?
Maybe
Mr.
we
Ben-
can have some more details
Yep.
from
Sure.
our HR
Ms.
person.
Yocum or Mr. Benty, would you like to share a little bit more here?
I think this is, do we currently have one educational assistant? So this is a contract with one person. We are phasing out our educational assistants, and there's only one left in the district. So the impact of the district, as you see their economic items from year one, is $3,700. So it's a contract for one person.
Any other discussion on this item? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 7-0. Thank you. Brings us to item 11D, consider approval of revised resolution 23-24, establishing combined polling places for multiple precincts and designating hours during which the polling places will remain open for voting for school district elections not held on the day of a statewide election in 2023. I'll entertain a motion to approve resolution 23-24.
So move, I'm sorry,
So moved.
and I'll second.
We have a motion by Ms. Boudreau, a second by Mr. Robichaud. Further discussion, or Mr. Benty, anything you'd like to add to this?
Does the board have any questions? Because if so, I'm going to defer them to our election expert, Kathy.
Ms. Zavro. Any questions, board members? Any questions on this? I think it spells it out pretty clearly in the resolution, if you will, so. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Ms. Steves, will you please do a roll call?
John Bellingham.
Aye.
Linda Boudreau.
Aye.
Linda Moore.
Aye.
Richard Olson.
Aye.
Jerry Robichaud.
Aye.
Cassie Steves, aye. Chad Wolf.
Aye.
Passes 7-0.
Thank you for that. Brings us to item 11E, consider approval of updates to the district calendar 2022-2023 school year. I will entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Olson, a second by Ms. Steves. Mr. Benty, you just want to touch on this?
We needed to move around some of our conferences and registration events because they were all on the same night, and it didn't allow our FACES, our family and community education specialists, to be able to interpret at the level that we needed them to. So changes needed to be made, and we're looking to continue those changes into the future as well, so that we are not bombarding our families and especially overworking our interpreters all on one night, so that our families get the service they deserve.
I would just like to say thank you to whoever brought this forward. Not sure why it wasn't before or anything like that, but I think it's a great thing, and we obviously need to provide those services. So just a thank you for recognizing that and bringing it forward. So
Now, they sent a letter, right? You sent a letter out, right?
I know
You did, right? We got a letter.
Yeah, the building sent theirs out, and then it also went in our digital newsletter.
perfect. Okay. Other discussion on this? Hearing none. We have a motion by Mr. Olson, a second by Ms. Steves. Hearing no further discussion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 7-0. Thank you. This brings us to item 11F, mid-year superintendent goals update. This is just an update. Mr. Benty.
Yes, so you can see the attachment there, the goals, and I have color-coded it to help break it out a little bit more. So what is in green are the three separate goals that the district, that the board has given me as the superintendent for this school year. The areas in yellow are the evidence of performance, and then what you see that is not in any color is what my notes are around this. So for goal number 1, develops and implements a plan to continue to support, mentor, evaluate, and encourage professional growth and efficacy of district leadership. For the first evidence of performance, which is around creating an action plan for this current school year and building off of the culture of excellence work. What I've written in here is that we have created our playbook. All right, we are not finished with it. So the leadership advisory team has met with Lighthouse, a local organization here in town, twice so far this year, and is scheduled to meet with Lisa, who's our person from Lighthouse, 2 more times in March and again in April. Additionally, I have met with Lisa around 5 additional times to that to set up the next 2 installments to our playbook. We will have our playbook finished by the end of this school year for full implementation for our 23-24 school year. We've completed the areas of why do we exist, how do we behave, and what do we do. And the next 2 pieces are how will we succeed and what is the most important right now. So that's what we will have finished by the end of this school year, so we will have a full implementation for next year. You want me to have any questions as we kind of go through these?
Sure, yeah.
So any questions on the evidence or performance for the first bullet there? And I've added more pieces around down there as well, so. The second part of that same goal was articulate and follow through on a clear vision and plan for support, mentorship, and evaluation of principals and assistant principals, all of whom are new to their positions, new to their building, or in the second year of their position. So I have been meeting with principals on a plan, do, study, act cycle. So far, I've met with each individual at least twice, just based around their goals. I want to be clear with this because I do not evaluate assistant principals, and that is in there. I evaluate principals. Principals then, in turn, evaluate their assistant principals. So I just wanted to clear that up. I'm currently in the process of meeting with principals and cabinet members about their mid-year reviews. So I've had a couple of those already, and then I will write up a 1-pager for each mid-year review for their file. And I plan to have all these completed by the end of February. They will then have 2 more check-ins with me here during the spring, and then a final year-end review that will be done May and June. Any questions about the second bullet? Same thing, the next bullet is the same thing except with cabinet members. So once again, I've been meeting with cabinet members on a plan, do, study, act cycle. So far, I've met with each individual at least twice, some of them 3 times around their goals and how they are working towards their goals. I'm currently in the process of meeting with them around their mid-year reviews as well. And the same piece will go. It'll be a one-pager write-up for each cabinet member for their mid-year review, 2 more scheduled meetings for the spring, and then a year-end review in May and June. Okay. The next bullet is articulate a plan for mentorship and support for myself in my first year of the superintendency, including self-reflection, self-evaluation, and sources of support and professional development. So far this year, I've attended the MASA, the Minnesota Association of School Administrators Conference back in October, and the MSBA conference here just a couple weeks ago in January. I plan on attending a couple more conferences before the end of the school year. I've been actively involved in attending and learning in our Big 9 superintendents meetings, which I find very valuable. It's where all Big 9 superintendents get together once a month and we sit and discuss superintendent stuff. It's super secret meeting, so I'd love to tell you what we talk about, but I'm not allowed to. And I have on here, those are held twice a month. They have been, up to this point, there's been 1 in person and 1 virtual. We just actually decided at our last meeting that we're gonna move those to once a month, except make sure that they are in person, so. And then I have a mentor superintendent that I meet with on a regular basis and have been actively involved with our MEP group, that is our Minnesota Educational Partners out of Mankato. Any questions from goal 1?
No, thank you.
Okay, goal 2 is develop and articulate a clear vision and action steps for continuous improvement in all schools regarding school climate and student behavior. The first evidence of performance is identify areas of growth in each school and document both district-wide approaches and building-specific approaches for implement. So Tracy and I have been working with a CNA group, a comprehensive needs assessment, for the past 3 months with our program leads and our cabinet members. So that can consist of a few coordinators that oversee programs, our principals, and cabinet members. We've identified the following pillars: ready for kindergarten, read well by 3rd grade, middle school math, and graduation for our work in this group. We've done an inventory of these areas and are in the process of prioritizing our resources and strategies around this work in these areas. The outcome of this work will allow us to better inform the school board around potential goals for the district in the future, as that this matches right with the world's best workforce that the board has discussed in previous meetings. All right. And that work is ongoing. We have another meeting actually tomorrow morning. Actually here in 12 hours exactly, right here in this room. So we'll be working on that, and we're looking to wrap up and really have some good prioritization pieces around that. And the work that you're going to be, or excuse me, the meetings that you've been asking for around setting district-wide goals are going to come out of this work, and the presentations that you're going to see over the next few months are directly related to the work that we've been doing since end of November, mid-November, in this CNA group. Align the vision and action steps to the core values of Faribault Public Schools. Develop a plan for determining the efficacy of action steps taken in support of this goal. So one of these big pieces has been really the Faribault Public Schools playbook. That has been one of the areas that has really touched on this directly, along with the next steps for that playbook. And then with our leadership advisory team, we spend a considerable amount of time each meeting going through the playbook and deciding and discussing how it's working or how it's not working. Excuse me, where it's being used and what's the success around it. Any questions for goal number 2? All right, goal number 3 is develop and articulate an updated vision and current action steps for continuous improvement in all schools regarding excellence in education. The first evidence of performance is collect, articulate, and communicate current initiatives regarding academic achievement and teaching and learning in our schools. So Tracy has brought regular data updates to our school board around FastBridge testing in our WIN program, and we're going to continue to update the board. The next update will most likely be in March. We have FastBridge testing through the end of this month. Some of it might spill into early February. There's just not enough of a time to be able to turn that data around for our February work session. So you're probably going to see it in March. And we're going to continue to make our decisions based on the data that we've collected, and we're in the process of becoming a more data-driven, data-based district in our decision making. This will be an ongoing process and an effort for our district. So like I've said in the past, we are very good at collecting data. We are very good at storing data. We are very good at looking at data. We have not been so good in this district about making our decisions based off of data. And that's one of the things, that's one of the most crucial pieces that I'm really pushing this year is what does the data tell us to do? All right. Any questions? Mr.
Mr.
Robichaud?
Benti, I appreciate your comment on that because too many organizations become data-rich and decision-making poor. So thank you for making that clarification.
The struggle with that, and it is a struggle, is that what do you do when the data tells you to make a decision that either 1, you don't want to make, 2, doesn't feel right? You know, it's a learning process for all of us in this, so. Any other questions?
I would just say thank you for your work on this.
The next part was identify areas of improvement in each school and at each level, and then consider and propose additional actions if appropriate. So I meet with the principals every week. So 1 week I meet with the elementary principals. The following week I meet with the secondary principals, and that rotation happens. Those principals have a meeting every week. Every Friday they either meet with me or they meet with cabinet. There's a preset agenda. And that's their learning and their mentorship pieces with me, and then me understanding what their needs are in that building, okay? And I think what you're going to see is as we move further, once we get through the budget adjustment cycle here, and we move more into April and May, principals are really going to be starting to set up what they want next school year to look like in their building, and you're going to see more pieces come to you that I've been working with them on around how they want to change or tweak the structure, either personnel structure or physical structure or educational structure within their sites. Confer an alignment of vision and action steps with the current strategic plan. So I talked about our playbook, our CNA process, leadership advisory team, and cabinet meetings have all focused around the board strategies of school climate and culture, equity, family and community engagement, mental health and safety, and student-centered learning. So those are at the top of each one of our agendas. They are right there for everyone to see. And we're actually, one of the things that you're going to see, and I'll give you a little snippet, we've taken these strategies and we have implemented them into those world's best workforce pillars. And some of the visuals and documentation that you're going to see coming out in the next couple months is going to show how we're merging all of this together so that we can really prioritize not only where our financial resources go, but also where our personnel and our time resources go also. Okay. And then develop a plan for determining the efficacy of action steps taken in support of this goal. So what I have down here is really the continuous improvement model based on a plan, do, study, act cycle. So whether we're looking at programming, whether we're looking at evaluations, this is what I am using. I drew this out on a piece of paper with a pencil, and Tracy was so nice to make it pretty and put it digitally down. But this is the path that I follow to then evaluate what's going on with the program, how's the program running, what do we need to change, tweak, or modify, or do we just need to scrap the program altogether? And that is everything that I have for you.
Thank you. Mr. Rosenthal.
Just a point, could you explain playbook for the public and for others who may want to know that
Yeah.
we're not developing a playbook for the football team?
Yeah, so the playbook is actually, I went through it at the beginning of the school year here. I think it was August or September I presented to the board around what the playbook is. I'm just going to pull it up on here. So the playbook is what we spent, and by we I mean the leadership advisory team, a group of about 35 people last year went through and spent time with Lighthouse. We did what was referred to as the culture of excellence training. We did the Clifton Strength Finders, and we got our top 10. We actually got all of our strengths, and I think there's 30-some strengths, 34 strengths, all listed from what is your number 1 to what is your number 34. And we got those all listed out, and then with those, we learned about how those strengths both work for you and potentially work against you when you're working with other people. Part of this work then was to create a playbook for all of us to then be on the same page around. Okay. And you'll see it hang around in the room. We need to get some more of them up, but they hang around. They're in my office, they're in principals' offices, they're in workrooms, and it's basically to get everyone on the same page. And that document is based on why do we exist, and it's we elevate and empower each student, every family, and our entire community to achieve their full potential. Right? That's why we exist. We talk about how do we behave. We say that we're professional, we're compassionate, we act with integrity, and we're advocates for students and families. And we have bullets underneath each one of those. All right. And the third part that we've done that we got to was what do we do? We spent a long time working with Lisa on, we know what we do, but how do we articulate it? And then someone said, wait a second, it's right there on the wall. So the what we do is actually our mission statement. So those are the 3 parts that we've gotten to so far. And like I said, we're working on 2 more pieces to that playbook to be finished up by the end of this school year.
Thank you for that clarification.
Other questions or comments for Mr. Benty regarding his mid-year superintendent goals update? Mr. Benty, I'll just tell you, thank you for this. Pretty in-depth, and certainly appreciate the evidence, if you will, below each point. So thank you very much. And board members, as you know, we'll go into a closed session to discuss in a little bit deeper detail. But thank you. So, okay. Hearing nothing else, we will move on to item 12, other items of information. 12A, school board members, the floor is yours. If there's anything you'd like to speak about.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to take this opportunity, and maybe others will as well, but we have an individual who's going to be leaving us at the end of January, who during her leadership journey has come and provided some dynamic leadership in our educational program for students. And I want to personally and professionally thank you, Tracy, for all of the work that you put forth. You came in at a time when we were in transition. Now we're going back into transition again, but the transition is not going to include the COVID stuff that you've had to deal with. And as an educator, I certainly appreciate and understand and recognize the dynamic leadership that you brought to this position as Director of Teaching and Learning. Wish you well in your journey of wherever you're headed, but thanks for stopping by and sharing some of your leadership with us.
Thank you, Mr. Robichaud. Anybody else? Anything you'd like to comment on?
Mr. Chair, if I may, so since we haven't had a board meeting since early December, we had a lot of great things continuing to go here in our public schools, and since the middle school is my building, I report on a couple things that happened there. First of all, the great orchestra and band and choir concerts that those middle school students did, but also it's right before the winter break, Christmas break, whatever you want to call it, Santa Smiles, organized by the Faribault Middle School Student Council, raised enough money and was able to make the holidays a lot brighter for a lot of families in need at the middle school and all that. And I know the high school did similar things like that as well. And also they continued and reached out more into the community as well by donating things to the Buckham West Senior Center. And some of those gifts then were passed out on behalf of Faribault Middle School at the annual meeting at Buckham West in January, first part of January there. So it was just a great thing to see our public schools out in the limelight there, of great thing our kids are doing beyond the classroom, being engaged within the community and making a difference in Faribault. So I want to thank Mr. Hawkins for his leadership and with that, and the Faribault Middle School students, and once again for all the very good things that are going on within our district. Thank you.
Thank you. Any board members, anything else? Okay. Ms. Corcoran, I'd like to, as well as Mr. Robichaud, just publicly thank you for your time and your efforts here and wish you nothing but the best in your future endeavors. So good luck. Okay. Hearing nothing else, that brings us to item 12B. Superintendent, Mr. Benty, anything you'd like to share?
Yeah, so I attended my first MSBA conference. Linda Moore and Linda Boudreau joined me up there. And I will tell you, it was those were, for me, 2.5 packed days of just learning. So it was great to be able to hang out with you there and learn a little bit more about each other. But that's a really great conference that we were able to go to. So people are probably, I'm feeling the spirit of Todd Sesker descend upon me from the year that we had the polar vortex. And I got a feeling that people are starting to get sick and tired of hearing my voice call them at home and tell them that we have a snow day or a 2-hour late start, or I'm seeing some nods out there on the board.
Maybe the adults are, I don't think the students are.
No, I am very, very popular with ages 5 to 18 in Faribault right now, okay? Ages 30 plus, I'm one of the most unpopular people in the city. So, yes, we have burnt through, we've had our snowiest winter on record to this point in the past 30 years. So if you're like, wow, we've had a lot of snow so far this year, you're right, we have, which equals a lot of snow days. So, and like I told, I don't remember which board member I was talking to, I said it's not necessarily the amount of snow we get, it's when we get it. And that has really been hard this year. We're getting the snow at the exact wrong times. So it's just not leading to us being able to stay in school that much. We're burning a lot of those days. So,
Mr. Benty, may I
Yes,
just
sir.
interject? Welcome to the superintendency.
Yeah. People say, don't you love snow days? And I say, no, because my snow day starts at 3:30 a.m. with a phone call to superintendents and then a webinar with the National Weather Service that starts at 4 a.m. So, yeah, I don't enjoy snow days, and my wife enjoys them even less.
You signed up for it. I don't think we have sympathy for you.
But I do think when I retire, I've got a really good gig as a meteorologist ready to go. So, I presented at the Lions meeting last week. They just wanted to get to know who the new superintendent was, came in, had a really great meeting with them. And then today I set up a meeting with, you talked about Buckham West, I've set up a meeting to go in here in February to meet with them and just sit down and talk. So I'm trying to get around. So if there are organizations that are out there listening and they would like just a meet and greet with me, or for me to come in and talk, reach out to me, and I am more than happy to come into your organization and just talk about what we do here and answer questions. Lastly, which is not last, I also want to recognize Tracy. Tracy came in. I've worked with Tracy as both the high school principal and the superintendent. She came in at exactly the wrong time to start the next journey of your administrative career. So Tracy started with us in the summer of 19. The summer of, yes, and then within 6 months had to deal with a pandemic. In the middle of, yes, in the middle of it. So she got a trial by fire, a lot of learning by drinking from the fire hose. So I applaud you. I thank you for everything that you've given to Faribault Public Schools. And like Dr. Robichaud, I wish you nothing but the best in your future endeavors. So thank you. And that's all I have.
Okay, thank you. Brings us to item 13, dates to remember, information only, February 6, 2023. 5:30 p.m. is our next work session here. February 7th, 2023 at 3:30 p.m. virtual is a policy meeting. February 13th, 2023, 7:30 a.m. virtual is the finance meeting. February 21st, 2023, 5:30 p.m. is our next business meeting. Note, that meeting is scheduled for Tuesday due to the legal holiday on Monday. And with that said, I will entertain a motion to close this meeting. To move into a closed session. With that said, though, I would ask for a 5-minute recess. So about 8:30 on the clock in the back room, we will move into a closed session, or actually open our closed session. So with that, I'll entertain a motion to move out of this session.
Mr. Chair, I'll move to move into a closed session for a superintendent mid-year review.
Thank you, Mr. Bellingham. Do we have a second? We have a motion by Mr. Bellingham, a second by Ms. Boudreau. Any further discussion? All right, hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 7-0. We'll reconvene in 5 minutes. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for coming. We appreciate